When you wish good for others, good things come back to you. This is the law of nature. A very good morning to all. Let's continue with the physics lessons. Last class I had given few questions to find the answers. Those questions were: why are the wheels of vehicles made circular? Why do we spray powder on carom board? Why does a matchstick catch fire? Why sportsmen use shoes with spikes? Why does a jar of a mixer become hot after running for few minutes? I hope you have found the answer. To understand better, let us learn about friction. When a ball is rolled on the ground, it stops after traveling a finite distance. An arrow shot from a bow keeps flying for some time and finally falls on the ground. A toy car needs constant muscular force or spring force to keep it going. When a force disappears, the toy car comes to stop. Objects do not come to rest on their own. In this chapter, we shall study the force that opposes the motion of an object. So today's class we will be learning what is friction, cause of friction, factors affecting friction and types of friction. The force which always opposes the motion of one body over the other body in contact with it is called the frictional force. Resistance to motion caused by one surface rubbing against other is also called friction. So a frictional force comes into picture when two substances are in contact with each other. Hence this is a contact force. It resists the motion of objects or surfaces. It always works in the direction opposite from the direction the object is moving. If this is the pushing force, then the friction will act in the opposite direction. It always slows down a moving object. Force of friction is the force which opposes the motion of an object over a surface. Here, the friction acts between the object and the surface. For example, a ball rolling on a ground gradually slows down and comes to rest due to friction between the ball and the ground. If you stop pedaling a bicycle, it slows down and comes to rest because of friction between the wheels and the road. This opposing force either slows down or stops a moving object. It also produces heat. If you rub your hands together, they become warm due to friction. What must be the cause of this friction? It is caused due to the interlocking of irregularities between two surfaces in contact. Friction is basically due to roughness of two surfaces in contact. A smooth surface appears to be smooth, but under a powerful microscope, it has minute irregularities. When one body is placed on the other, the two surfaces in contact get interlocked. When sufficient force is applied, the interlocks are broken and so the body begins to move. So the major cause for friction is surfaces, that is smooth surface and rough surface. On smooth surface, the friction force is less, whereas on the rough surface, it is more. The factors affecting friction: the nature of the surfaces, that is either it is a smooth surface or rough surface. On rough surface the friction is more, on smooth surface the friction is less. And the second one is how hard the surfaces press together or interlock together. It is less on smooth surface and more on the rough surface. There are three types of friction: static friction, sliding friction and rolling friction. Static friction. When a body is in contact with the surface at rest and no external force is applied, the force of friction is zero. When a small force is applied on a body, the force of friction starts acting on a body in the direction opposite to the tendency of motion of the body. As long as the body is at rest, the force of friction is equal to the applied force and is called the static force. So when a body is at rest, the force of friction is called static friction and is always equal and opposite to the applied force. It is the strongest frictional force. Static friction is also called gripping friction. It is a force that prevents relative motion between surfaces in contact with each other. You could not start or stop a car without static friction between the tire and the road. You cannot walk or run or you will slip without static friction. Sliding friction. When an external force is applied to start a relative motion, the interlocking of surfaces gets off, thus causing less frictional force. The amount of sliding friction depends on two factors: the weight of the object that is moving and the type of surface the object slides across. So it is a minimum force required to make a body just to slide over the surface, and it is called as sliding friction. It depends upon two factors: the weight of the object and the type of the surface. When two solid surfaces slides over each other, can observe sliding friction. It works in the direction of the object's motion, and the examples are: when you apply a brake for a cycle, it slows down and then stops. Skinning of your leg, walking, writing, these are all the examples of sliding friction. Rolling friction. It is the frictional force between the rollers on a body and the surface is called rolling friction. It exists between two surfaces when a body rolls over the other. It is easier to roll down than to push a barrel. It is easier to push a cart with wheels. Skating is easier, and also if you have a wheels in a circular shape, it is easier to move on the ground, which causes less friction. So these are some of the examples of rolling friction. It is a friction that occurs between surfaces in motion in which one of the surfaces is a wheel, roller or ball. The friction that occurs when an object rolls across a surface. It is easier to overcome than sliding friction. Static friction is a friction that is exerted on an object which is at rest. Sliding friction is a friction exerted when an object slides over surface. Rolling friction is the friction exerted when an object rolls over a surface. Sliding friction is slightly less than static friction, and rolling friction is less than sliding friction and static friction. I hope you have understood today's class. You have a small activity here. You have to take a cricket ball or a plastic ball or a cricket ball and roll them along a smooth surface, rough surface or a surface with obstacles such as pebbles, and draw conclusion about the force of friction acting on the ball. Make a note of all the points given in the slides in your classwork. I'll end the session by playing a small video.
Types of friction. Introduction. We do activities like walking, running, and playing, and in all these activities, friction play an important role. You must have seen people skiing on snow, an interesting sport that needs balancing and knowledge of frictional force. Do you know that frictional forces can be classified based on its features? Let us find out the various types of frictional force. Objectives. At the end of this lesson, you will be able to describe the types of friction, discuss advantages and disadvantages of friction, illustrate the way to reduce or increase the friction. Friction can be classified into 4 types: static friction, sliding friction, rolling friction, and fluid friction. The ball on ground is at rest at this point. Static friction is acting on it. The frictional force that exists between the two surfaces so long as they are relatively at rest when an external force acts is called static friction. There is no actual movement of the body in static friction. In static friction, force of static friction is equal to the applied force. Static friction ends with the beginning of sliding of the object at rest. When we push the ball, it starts moving. The frictional force present when one body moves slowly or slides over another body is known as sliding friction. Once a body slides, the sliding friction is reduced a little. It is less than the static friction. In sliding friction, the force of sliding friction is equal to the constant pull force. You must have seen attachers and other pieces of luggage fitted with rollers. Even a child can pull such pieces of luggage. Why is it so? Let us find out. The rollers reduce friction and roll on the objects on rollers. It is always easier to roll than to slide a body over another. That is the reason it is convenient to pull the luggages fitted with rollers. The force of friction between the rollers on a body and the surface is called the rolling friction. Rolling friction is much less than the sliding friction. Since the rolling friction is smaller than the sliding friction, sliding is replaced in most machines by rolling by the use of ball bearings. Common examples are the use of ball bearings between hubs and the axles of ceiling fans and bicycles.